Welcome everyone that has already joined. Just waiting for the webinar to populate. I still see the attendee number going up. All right, we'll get going. Again, welcome everyone that's joined for the SPI webinar. My name's Grant Price. I'm the head guide for Blue Ridge Mountain Guides. And this evening I'll moderate the session as needed. And I'm in good company. With me, I've got 5 other provider pool members of the SPI program from around the country. So first of all, I want to thank them for volunteering their time and expertise this evening. And with that, we'll go around and do some introductions. Sean, would you like to start off? You're first on my list of windows.
And apologize if there's a cat yelling in the background while I'm unmuted. So my name is Sean Taft-Morales. I'm based in DC. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I run sport rock climbing centers. We're a gym in Alexandria and have an outdoor guide service. I'm an SPI provider and a rock instructor.
All right, and should we go next to Derek?
Hi there, I'm Derek DeBruin. I live in Ogden, Utah. I work at Weber State University where I teach a number of classes as an outdoor educator. And I also guide for myself on the side. And let's see, I am an SPI provider, a rock guide, and an apprentice alpine guide.
Excellent. And Ron?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ron Funderburke. I'm the Director of Education at the Colorado Mountain School. I live here in Golden, Colorado with my wife and sons. He, him, and his pronouns for me, please. Yeah, that's me.
All right, and Adam?
Yeah, Adam Fox. Currently in New Zealand, living in New Zealand now. North Carolina for 20 years. Ex-board of directors, ex-TC, ex-instructor pool. I guess got the whole SPI program going back in the day. Was involved in the top manager program before that as well. So, and now guide mainly for fun and for the New Zealand Alpine Club, I guess, over here. Yeah.
Excellent. And Azissa?
Hi, my name is Azissa. I use she, her pronouns. I am the education manager for the American Alpine Club. And I am an assistant SPI provider, assistant rock guide, SPI, all of that stuff. And I'm based in Boulder, Colorado.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so with that, talk just briefly about kind of the intent for the webinar this evening. The idea is we'll largely just do a Q&A session, and you can feel free to direct questions to individual providers or just to the group in general. And the way to submit those questions is through the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screens. We've got a few questions that have come in like pre-webinar, so maybe we can open up those. Does anyone want to field number 1 that we were just talking about?
I'm happy to field number 1. Folks, the first question here is about the scope of practice. It asks, well, if an SPI graduates but hasn't taken their exam yet, they've taken the course but not the exam, according to the SOP, they need to be supervised. They can work under the supervision of a certified SPI. And so the question sort of flips that. And it says, well, does that mean that if I hire someone, I have to make sure that they have at least graduated from the SPI course? The scope of practice doesn't outline that. It doesn't say that if you bring assistants onto your outing, that they are required to have any level of training. You got to think really carefully about that, though, even though the scope of practice doesn't tell you who you're allowed to work with, who do you want to work with? Surely you'd want someone with a modicum of training and expertise assisting your students and clients. So That's not directly outlined in SOP, but I think we consider it an implication.
Maybe just to add to what Ron's saying, not as familiar with SOP, I think, as some other folks on the call, but I do think that sort of thing, if it's not outlined in SOP, just comes down to your own risk management, you know, like how comfortable you are with taking on the risk of having an additional person there, which I think is just another way of saying what Ron's saying. Like, if you have somebody who doesn't have that training, do you know what training they have and what you can trust them to do, supervised or unsupervised, while still keeping your students safe in a way that they expect you to if you hold that certification.
Another question that isn't, well, this isn't clarified in the question, is what's the overall ratio? So is it 2 additional people to help belay the 5 kids, and then you're guiding 5 kids, or 4 kids and the 2 people? You would even be in ratio if it was 2 camp counselors belaying and 4 kids, you know. We often end up with our camps, just because of the way staffing works out and scheduling, and the value of having people who are used to working with a group of kids all week for the one day they go outside at the end of the week, where we're within ratio, fully meeting all of the criteria of SOP, all of that. And there's additional untrained, basically just kid supervisors who are there along for the ride, that often, even including them as participants, would be in ratio. So yeah, those people don't necessarily detract from you if you're not relying on them to run that site. If you're still able to run your own ratios, you know, do everything the way that you want it to, a little extra belay help seems like, you know, think of them as really good clients who don't want to climb and are great at belaying.
Another question here is hypothetical. So a local climbing gym hired me because they like that this person has an SPI on staff to help teach indoor lead classes. Is this considered within the scope of practice for the SPI, or should they seek out a CWI certification as well? And I'll just kind of speak to this one. The SPI programs really don't prepare you necessarily with the skill set for indoor climbing instruction. However, within SOP, a SPI is considered a supervisor of CWI terrain. And you can therefore work unsupervised within CWI terrain as an SPI. Does anyone want to take a whirl at the third question we've got going in the chat there?
I can kind of start this one off since it relates specifically to a program of the AAC. So for those of you on the call who aren't familiar, the AAC has been trying to put together a program called Grassroots Education. And the general premise, and I think probably the lesson that will come away from this question as a whole, is our program focuses specifically on using volunteers to teach climbing locally. So a lot of people have different volunteer institutions close to them, whether it's the AAC or someone else, maybe it's a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club. But the question generally, which I can say specifically in a second, but I think the question generally is, how do volunteers and other non-professionals work collaboratively with professionals and in a way that enhances the industry and the profession, rather than having end users just see it as, oh, well, this is free guiding or free professional instruction. So to quote the question specifically, so everybody's on the same page, says, how can professional guides take part in AAC's grassroots education so that the guide and the community as a whole both benefit? Does grassroots education help guides by educating the public about professional mentors and therefore expanding the market? Does grassroots education threaten the fragile existence of professional guides in the Southeast by shifting clients towards a free service? And so I kind of answered that a little bit already. I'm sure other people have thoughts too, but I do think that in general, in the United States in particular, we're very used to doing things on our own, right? Especially in the Southeast, there's been a mentality of the school of hard knocks more so than the climbing school down the road. And so I think, you know, just by creating a culture of saying we should be learning together and we should be prioritizing learning, that it does end up benefiting the whole community. And as long as we can, you know, in each of our discrete little communities, if we're a volunteer educator or if we're a professional educator, that we can just make clear to people what each individual value proposition is. If I'm a volunteer, even if I have an SPI, my goals for the day and what I'm going to be giving students is much different perhaps than what a professional working in a professional context is. I would say, especially in the volunteer context and any other non-professional context, it's really about peer learning and community and learning together. And inevitably that means that you might not learn some things as fast, but that's kind of the trade-off. And you might not get that one-on-one attention that a professional may be able to give you for the rates that they charge. And so, you know, when people come to those volunteer offerings or any other volunteer offerings, I think as long as those people can say like, hey, look, this is what you're getting in this context, and this is what a professional can offer you, and this is what this other service can offer you. And as long as we can sort of be in communication about those things and clear about what we're offering and what we're not offering, then we can actually support one another. I'm sure other people have other opinions.
Can I ask you a question then? What courses are the American Alpine Club offering now? Like introduction to climbing experiences, or are they doing skills courses, multi-pitch, rescue?
Yeah, I would say, you know, like a lot of volunteer institutions, it really is left up to the volunteers to a certain degree, and especially with a national distribution like the AAC has, you know, courses and clinics that make sense in Charlotte might not be the same courses and clinics that make sense in Seattle. And so it is, you know, standardized to a certain degree because as a national organization, we have a lot of articles and guidance. But at the end of the day, it's also very custom, and like any national organization, the AMGA included, there's only so much consistency you're going to get across that vast of programming.
Cool.
I'd also add too to this that I think there's opportunity in everything, and the AAC programming, as far as I understand, at the local level as Azissa mentioned, is decentralized. It also comes with a lot of latitude. So I have talked to you know, some local chapter members before about like, well, what would it be to like does your previous education programs, like maybe there's a small fee for that to get people to like actually commit to showing up. Like that idea was certainly floated. But by the same token, like if I'm gonna go volunteer to work a program, which I do a few times a year for local climbing festivals and things like that, to me, it's, if nothing else, it's a marketing opportunity, right? Like if I show up and teach a clinic and deliver a good product, there's already a captive audience there because they've clearly demonstrated that they're willing to engage with formalized climbing instruction. And so, you know, like there's obviously potential then just to meet someone who's like really psyched and wants to go further and would like that individualized attention and wants to learn more quickly or whatever. And that person may very well hire me later. And that I've certainly had that as a result too. So I don't think that there's necessarily a problem in delivering that sort of free education, and even being a part of that. If you consider ways that you might leverage that opportunity to both serve the climbing community while also providing them a product that pays your bills.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and echo that. I think I work with the DC chapter as the education chair for the Alpine Club and run a guide service in the climbing gym. And I've my experience, you know, I cannot speak to the Southeast as a specific culture and a specific, you know, market, but in my experience, it's absolutely been mutually beneficial. I think the guiding and professional climbing instruction is something that most people don't know they'll really benefit from and will really help them. But having the opportunity to access that and take a clinic with a professional, I think that by and large, one of the takeaways is, oh, wow, there's a lot I can learn in this context and from someone who is trained and certified to teach it really well. And it absolutely leads to increased enrollment.
got another question here that's somewhat technical focused. The context of it is running high volume top roping days, an efficient way to connect people in and out of the top rope setup without having them tie in with a figure 8. And some interest in like if a magnetron from Black Diamond would serve a purpose here. And then also if there's the necessity of a slip hitch or clove hitch in the knot loop to prevent the carabiners from crossing. Anyone want to speak to that one? And I believe Ron has already given some input to this individual.
I still kind of want to hear Ron's answer.
My answer has always been the same to these types of questions. Like, we've always prioritized a secure connection with the climbing rope. So figure 8 follow through, we've all just gravitated towards that knot for a century because it is a really secure connection to the end of the climbing rope. If we're getting into more of an assembly line where we need to clip people in and out really quickly, we need to prioritize that same kind of security. So, for years it was a bite knot with 2 locking carabiners opposite and opposed, and guides and climbing instructors, being the tinkerers they are, they start experimenting with this. They say, well, don't I effectively create the same kind of security if I have a locker and a non-locker opposite and opposed? Well, sure. Don't you effectively have the same kind of security if you use a piece of technology like a triple function locking mechanism with a capture inside the carabiner so that you can't cross-load the carabiner? Sure, I think these are all arguably secure connections to the climbing rope, and that's what we're trying to achieve, whether it's an assembly line or teaching rope craft.
When I deal with the need for this efficiency, I tend to use 2 opposite and opposed locking carabiners, asymmetric Ds. And then as far as the slip hitch or not, I think the reality is with the forces involved in top rope climbing, the potential to fail 2 carabiners in that fashion is highly unlikely. And to me, the slip hitch is just something extra there to have to monitor, especially if the climber is going to be clipping themselves in and out of the system. And then as Ron mentioned, if I happen to have a triple action locking carabiner, that could be a nice tool as well.
Yeah, I just add that, I mean, with all climbing, with speed becomes higher risk, and this is a classic example of maybe getting too techie and focusing on which configuration or whatever, where if you've got a high volume of people, my more big concern is managing that high volume, is making sure the connections are great, but also the belaying and the backup belaying and the communication is the focus, maybe not the configuration of a beaner or whatever, and that's something that really going to get through to the SPI level is the high speed becomes high risk, and it's more the focus on the bigger picture than something, a technical sort of anomaly, as it were,
Yeah, I'd also add to this as well that a lot depends on your premise, right? Because there's nothing that says you have to tie in with figure 8 knots and teach people how to do that in the first place, right? We often just do that as part of an outing because people want to learn to climb to some extent. Creates a feeling of self-efficacy. They're part of the experience, right? We can add them to the process of learning to tie in. That's a great thing to like walk away from your day from. But if that's not sort of expressly a goal, you're still going to want to inspect whatever connection is happening, right? Because if you've got the crowd of people coming through your system, you like as Adam alluded to, like we still got to manage the belaying and maybe backup belayers and this group of people. Like there's a lot of logistics occurring, and I guess while it's possible that you might be more likely to introduce an error in tying a figure 8 knot as opposed to clipping in and out, I would argue that by the time you've manipulated 2 opposed carabiners that are locked and have a slip hitch on them, you probably could have just tied someone in with a figure 8 anyway, and you got an even secure connection. So
I'll race you, Derek.
What's that?
I'll race you.
So yeah, we can race, Sean. Maybe I need to do more climbing gym work. That's not my bread and butter. Go ahead.
Oh, I have just, when you're done, I'll add one other thought on that.
Sure. But then conversely, that also requires you to get up into sort of people's space a little bit more to tie that thing to their harness. But just something to consider is that you can still use that secure connection, and frankly, the efficiency over the scope of your whole day, if you're running the top roping for 8 hours or something, you're probably going to be able to tie knots faster than people can climb as long as you might have them climb, if that makes sense. Like the tying of the knot versus clipping in is probably not the limiting factor.
I'll just say that, yeah, I think from a gym perspective, this is what we do 10 hours a day, every weekend and on every school holiday. And it's 2 non-lockers opposite and opposed. We use auto lockers all around the gym. They eventually start to stop working as well. It's something else you have to maintain and really inspect and make sure it's up to scratch in a way that barrel gates don't have the same type of failure over time. And then Derek touched on it a little bit, but just from a privacy and kind of personal space perspective, and especially when working with kids, using carabiners to clip into either a belay loop or a harness with a raised attachment point. You don't have to get as close. You're further from people's personal space, especially for those kids. And for unclipping as well, you can pull the rope, get a little tension, reach in, grab the carabiner. You never have to touch the body, touch the harness. You're a few inches further away, which can just be great for everyone's comfort. And especially if you're doing, long shifts of just over and over repetitive clipping people in or tying them in. The 2 carabiners works for me, and it gives you a little space. And
one other facet of that same question was selecting a different knot, like a BHK or a Super 8, which I'm assuming the inquiry is around ease of untying once lots of people have loaded it through the day, or maybe you're working with some larger individuals. One that I might throw into that list that's in the SPI manual is the bowline tied on the double loop bowline on a bite could be an option there. Personally, I don't find myself applying different knots that often, but yeah, it's certainly an option. All right, and another question here is, how can I best prepare for a rock guide course, and what should I expect?
All right, I'll go. So I think the first thing to do is to go just peruse the AMGA's website with the rock guide for the rock guide page, and read it thoroughly, see what's in there. It gives you an idea of what you can expect. But to that end, there are a number of prerequisite requirements about the number of multi-pitch climbs you've completed, the commitment grade of those climbs, the difficulty of those climbs. And you'll end up being in the ballpark of some 50 different climbs, with some climbing up to 510A, and at some number of climbs at a minimum of grade 3 in commitment level to get on the program. So you'll need to do those things to prepare. That's the whole point of the prereqs, is to help you prepare for that. And then beyond that, I think I found that I do best on AMGA programs when I am well prepared for them physically. So whatever the movement standard is, that should feel pretty straightforward. So if it's a 5'9" movement standard, there shouldn't really be much question about whether you can do the 5'9" on the route that you've been assigned. It should be sort of a given, so that you can focus on learning all the technical systems that are associated with that, and the client care pieces, and the little bits of coaching and instructional technique that go along with it. And then just having mileage in the terrain makes that much easier to pull off. And then aside from that, I can't speak directly to the curriculum right now since I'm not on the IT, but in general, you can expect lots of route assignments, mock guiding folks on various multi-pitch climbs. You can also expect to learn a little bit about short roping. You'll learn portions of the rock rescue drill. Then there'll be bits about risk management and professionalism and equipment and sort of all the details that go into that as well. Yeah, I think if you do your homework and show up with your own sort of bevy of questions to begin with, and a decent understanding of how multi-pitch climbing works, and then the physical fitness to match it, then you can really focus on not having to worry about what the climbing is, but learning all the stuff associated with the guiding part of it. And if you've got the technical skill set already, where like idea of that, then instead of having your mind blown about, oh my gosh, I just saw this transition and that was crazy, you can really learn the nuances and ask much better questions.
Yeah, starting with the SPI program is a good idea, which I guess now people are, right? They already, if this question here sort of puts us in the SPI program, but the change from when we saw people coming into the rock instructor program that had done the SPI, and the people who, the first program was what's now called the rock guide course, the difference is incredible, So yeah, taking other courses to get you prepared to think differently, be ready. But yeah, a lot of climbing obviously, and trying to find guides and obviously getting a mentor is fantastic, but just trying to befriend guides, go climbing with the guides who've done the course and the program is a way to go. Just get yourself in that mindset of what's expected, and so that you get the most out of the course, and being prepared for the course, not going too soon, so that you get the most out of that course rather than trying to again crash through it quickly to get it before the season or whatever,
I might one thing to contribute, if folks are trying to think about rock guide from a single pitch background, whether you're in the Midwest or the Southeast or someplace where there's not a lot of grade 4 free climbing, grade 4 and up, I would just shed some light from my own experience. I was in the same boat. And a lot of my foundational personal climbing was in the Southeast, and I made those prerequisites work by doing link ups and by doing long aid climbs on the north side of Looking Glass. And if I could have gone back to myself, I would have told myself the opportunity cost that I perceived from a trip to Yosemite or a trip to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison or to Red Rock, Nevada is just not as big a deal as I blew it up to be in my mind. I should have just taken more big trips to those venues and gotten more experience on that big terrain rather than trying to make it work in the Southeast. I wish I would have given myself that advice. That'd be some advice I'd give to any listener. Just go ahead and invest in that big road trip.
Maybe not right now.
Yeah, not right now.
I would echo everything that's been said and also add that the same, if you're coming at this from the perspective of having taken the SPI course and exam, the same preparation that you would have done for that is going to be really helpful. So not just being versed in the technical aspects from a recreational sense, but really taking people into that terrain who you feel as though you can comfortably manage, but they do have to be managed. Like they're not sort of self-sufficient climbers, and you have to do some things with them and sort of take care of them to a certain degree. So, like taking actual students is going to get you all the things that you're not going to get as a recreational climber and all the things that you're not going to think of. Whereas you can just kind of leave your, independent friend at the belay and not really give them any coaching and not really think of all the things that they're not going to think of. You really have to do that with somebody who like truly doesn't really get it. And so obviously that you're taking on additional risk when you take that person in that environment. And so keep that in mind. But I think taking real students is the best practice you can have. And Adam kind of mentioned this as far as mentors. I think one thing that's important to keep in mind with the guide track programs that was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around initially is, unfortunately, there isn't really a handbook in the way there is for the SPI program. And there's just a lot of things about that program you're never going to know unless you talk to somebody who's been through it. And so even more so than with the SPI program, like it is really worth the time to find people who've gone through that program and really ask them about their experience, ask them about the technical skills they covered, ask them about, all of the things that were new to them, because even though there is a handbook for those guide track programs, it's just not the same resource that the SPI handbook is. And so if you're really unsure about what technical skills you need to be practicing, it's going to be hard to get that information unless you reach out maybe to the AMGA directly, or probably more easily to somebody who's taken that program that you know, or just like investing the time to connect with those people.
I'll just give a really quick hyper-specific answer, which is figure your note-taking situation out. I'm a huge fan of like doing some videos. Make sure you have extra memory on your phone, batteries, all of that. Just figure out so you can take the notes you want when you want, because you're going to be seeing all kinds of stuff. At the end of the day, you will not remember all of the things that you took notes on. So some good way to document for sure.
Yeah, I'll second that. And it's something I see really frequently with the SPI course, is that folks just don't take enough notes, and they don't get the video and have a way to rewind the tape and go back through this stuff and really learn it outside of the course environment. Okay, so why don't we bounce over to the Q&A box here. This question is from Jacob. What variety of programming have we been offering to clientele during the COVID-19 outbreak?
At the Colorado Mountain School, we've, the stay-at-home orders happened, right at the end of our avalanche education season. So we basically took all the classroom elements from an Area 1 course and shifted them into an online program. And so folks can still get some avalanche education from home. We did that. But otherwise, I characterize this shutdown as kind of the opportunity on the backside of a challenge. If you think of the things you say to yourself as a climbing school, like, oh, if we had time, if we weren't so busy, we would do this. So we would really reinvest in our curricula or our resources that we could create for students. Well, for us at CMS, like, this is our time. Like, this is the time we've been dreaming of. So we really are digging into creating resources for students so that when we do get back online, we've just really paid a lot of attention to our educational catalog.
Yeah, at Blue Ridge Mountain Guides, we wrapped things up right at the end of March as stay-at-home orders were coming into play and land was starting to shut down. And we're offline until at least April, the end of April, and then we're assessing, what May might look like and just taking it a day at a time. So yeah, really the only offerings have been things, like putting webinars together and then trying to make more tech videos, stuff like that.
I might also add too, like, if you're asking this specifically to try and figure out what you might offer to your clientele, I think a lot of it depends on the relationships you currently have and the skill sets you currently possess. Because a lot of us as climbing instructors or climbing guides have, additional areas of expertise, right? In much the same way that you might just like encourage folks to have, like, read this book and let's talk about your thoughts on your head game. Or maybe your expertise is more on the fitness side of things and you can recommend some good at-home workouts. Maybe there's a way to capitalize on that service, or all sorts of things like that. So there's definitely avenues for creativity. Other options as well might be like trying to punt things down the line a little bit and offering gift certificates for later redemption, or book now for the fall when hopefully this is all over and we'll get you a discount. Like, those sorts of things too might be ways to sort of maintain a revenue stream and also actually still provide value.
Awesome. So we'll go back to our chat box here. And for this question, I'm going to open up the audio for Andrew Migas Russell, who's the SPI program director right now.
Hello.
Hey, Andrew, can you hear us?
I can, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining. So I've got a question here that I copy and pasted over to you. Do you just want to start this one off?
Sure, yeah. So it sounds like the question was, will the AMGA be hosting a large group training for providers to create cohesion in their operations as a broad pool? So this is more so big picture related to the providers teaching the SPI and CWI programs. I guess my first thought is it's a great question. I love the idea. I think having large group training to offer for providers would be key in cohesion amongst the pool of providers. I'm not sure if that's totally feasible though. Currently with the 3-year continuing education requirement of having providers gather together at least every 3 years and do some additional training and make sure they're all on the same page. I think that's challenging enough to get providers to travel to somewhere and partake in the financial overhead of committing to something like that. So moving forward, there isn't a plan to necessarily provide a large group training. I love the idea. I think it'd be great. I don't know if it's that feasible. Plans that I have to kind of address the kind of the bigger question there, which is creating cohesion amongst providers, would be other things I've been doing behind the scenes that maybe students haven't been seeing in terms of provider monthly newsletters. Also, goals moving forward, training up and trying to get training, kind of large group trainings for the provider trainers. And so SPI and CWI provider trainers are those providers who are senior providers, and they are able to assess and promote SPI and CWI assistant providers. So if I can put an emphasis on kind of cohesion with the provider trainers, then my hope is that would just be a little bit more effective financially, and then those provider trainers going back to their regions and being able to provide some mentorship in terms of cohesion to providers in their surrounding areas. So those are a couple thoughts offhand. And I'm open to any follow-up questions as well.
Yeah, I got a few. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And so is there not a discipline coordinator anymore? You're doing it now? Or?
Yeah, so the title discipline coordinators transitioned to the provider trainer lead. And so the PT lead is the head of all the provider trainers and providers in
that?
terms, excuse me?
Who's that?
That's Ron. Yeah, so Ron's Ron's the.
They just changed his name. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the title's been changed slightly, and what we're trying to do is take some of the burden off of Ron since his position is unpaid. And we're just trying to put more of that burden on my shoulders.
Sure.
And then also just have some consistency there. And and so there are additional responsibilities, but yeah.
So Ron, are you going around the country doing the provider trainings every year, like New England, Southeast, and Colorado, California, or not?
The show doesn't go on the road so much. We tend to focus provider training and refreshing on the annual meeting.
Okay, well, that's one thing I would definitely recommend, because obviously when I used to do it, I was in those areas every year, so I'd be working with those providers annually, not every 3 years, and that would be critical for me to see that. But this is great, this Zoom thing. I sound like an old guy, but this is great. Wouldn't we use this as part of this tool to get groups of 15 or 20 for an hour or so session every now and again, and put people into different groups so they've got different you see from people from different parts of the country. That's a great, it's not the answer, that's a fraction, but it's just something else that this is really beneficial, I think. I think it's great. So that's one part. But having somebody going around that sort of touchstone, that going to all these places annually, making sure that, making sure everyone's on the right page is so critical. So critical. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, Adam. I think that's really important. It's something I've definitely been working on, trying to come up with a framework and a structure for making that happen. Whether it's kind of a combination of myself and the provider trainer lead, Ron, and kind of how we can balance that, because they're definitely, it's definitely a need.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about it afterwards maybe, but I'd love to help out with that.
And then Andrew, while we have you here, I think that one other small facet to that question was, should people expect any changes with the progression of folks coming into SPI providership?
Yeah, so there's been an update. So I've created a web page on the AMGA website. You can go to hover your cursor over the programs tab and go down to the becoming a provider page. And that has a detailed flow chart. It's fairly similar to what's always been in place. There's been one change in terms of the prerequisites, and that's that we are looking for folks to be either a rock instructor, a multi-pitch instructor, or a rock guide or higher, as opposed to folks coming in as assistant rock guides. So that's been one change. But for all complete details, they're all listed online. And yeah, I'm actually hoping to host a webinar via the AMGA in the next couple of weeks here, just for any folks who are interested in becoming a provider, and just kind of opening up dialogue into the, into that discussion. It looks like someone said, wait, was the rock instructor not phased out? So we're doing rock instructors accepted as a provider till, I believe, 2023. I might have to fact check that. But we're just providing an opportunity for those kind of final rock instructors who are interested to apply to become a provider. And then, yeah, from there, it's phased out.
When does the rock instructor program end? Like, what happens to those 133 current rock instructors?
What happens, they still maintain their certification. I believe the AMGA is just transitioning to the multi-pitch instructor, and there's complete details on the website for multi-pitch instructor. And it's really just a shift in the multi-pitch instructors, like kind of a shift in the terrain that they can manage compared to what a rock instructor was actually rather similar to an assistant rock guide. And so there's been an actual little bit more of a delineation there.
What happens to the rock instructor certified individual? They keep that certification forever, or it disappears in 2 years, or what?
No, that they keep that forever. That's theirs as long as they maintain whatever they need to maintain to keep that cert. It's just phasing out in terms of meeting the prereq to become a provider.
Wow, okay. So the AMGA is going to continue to promote a certification in 10 years that no longer exists. That sounds terrible. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so changing gears to Q&A questions again. We've got 3 in the box here and about 15 minutes. I'm also happy to hang out in here beyond 8:30, but I want to be respectful of everybody else's time. This first one from John. Other folks in the panel, are you all familiar with the mountain qualification label?
Yeah, I can go into this a little bit. Ron knows too. I think Adam probably does as well. Basically, mountain qualification label is like this really Euro phrase, but basically what we're talking about here is the UIA endorsement that already exists in the US for the SPI program. So there's been a project, this is sort of AAC land again, we're creeping into with our volunteers in here, but yeah, we just like to take that UIA endorsement and create some volunteer specific credentials. And so, you know, the land of AMGA is professionals and people working for commercial services. And there's sort of a gap there for people who aren't making money off this necessarily, but still want to provide a high quality service and high quality instruction. So I think the question here is just about, just like the SPI pool, if we were to create these volunteer specific credentials, then we would need providers who are able to provide those trainings and certifications. And the question here is about how people would become those providers. And so, you know, I think that's still very much up in the air for sure. But I think this is a great place to start. Obviously, SPI providers already have a lot of learned experience from teaching people how to facilitate single pitch climbing, and a lot of those things are going to be the same regardless of whether you're a professional or you're working in a volunteer context. And so those people are probably going to be, you know, the first line of providers for whatever volunteer specific credential is created, and then I'm sure we'll go from there.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add there. I think that's kind of it. I would just point out that we've piloted some of these programs, and in the pilot programs we used SPI providers. Like I was the one conducting the exams, and in one case Azissa was an assistant. So that's what the piloting was based on. But like Azissa says, this program is still very much in a design phase, and the future might hold lots of different possibilities.
I just want to be clear too, the mountain qualification label is something that the SPI and CWI programs hold. And it's just a UIA endorsement. So if you want to go, if you're not familiar with what they are, you can easily go onto the UIA website and search that, and it'll pop up with a credential in the US, and that is the SPI and CWI through the AMGA currently.
Cool. All right, so this next question is, how are instructor level certification members represented on the AMGA board of directors? How are they represented at technical committee level when huge changes are being proposed and pushed through? Major change right now would be the eradication of the rock instructor programs and replacement with the multi-pitch instructor.
I don't think it's any secret that instructor level representation is not good at the high level. So, you know, we can talk about why that is and what the benefits are to having those people. But I think part of it is a lack of messaging that it's important from the organization at a high level, that they want people like that on the board and in the technical committee. And so if you're in this crowd and you think you could meet that qualification, I think a lot of it is just going to be putting yourself in those positions. And I know that a lot of people on this call would be happy to support that, but yeah, I don't think it's any secret that most of the people at the high level in the AMGA are really representing the interests of IFMGA guides, and that's a huge part of the focus. And not to say that instructors don't get represented, but I would say it's probably not representative of how many instructors are in the membership pool.
Yeah, and I guess I would just want to add some nuance to that a little bit. Like it is true that none of the elected board members are solely certified CWIs or certified SPIs, but a lot of your elected directors are SPI and CWI providers. Like myself, Matt Shove, Elena Arends, Jason Martin just stepped down last year, and all of us ran for the board on platforms to represent the interests of climbing instructors in the United States. So I'm a certified guide, I confess, but I did run for the board to represent the interests of climbing instructors. And many of my colleagues on the board did the same.
I'd also add that if you go read the board minutes, you can see where those folks who have been running on that platform have been doing just that and attempting to advocate for the instructor contingent of the organization as well.
Yeah, I'd like, it would be great to see on the board positions for SPIs or, you know, something like that, rather than just saying, you know, try harder to run for the board and to other people. It's overwhelming, and you know, so it'd be great to see some positions on the technical committee. I don't know what the technical committee is made up of nowadays, but and the board make up positions on those committees and boards that have to be filled by this SPI. It's also good to say, you know, like, oh, I was once an SPI or a provider, but it's the people that are working in that terrain and doing that as their job every day. That would be great to get their ideas on, you know, and where the direction is going. Yeah, because I mean, I say, I told you guys the other day, 81% of the AMGA, out of the certified AMGA people right now, 81% are instructors, CDY, SPI, or rock instructor, and 6-point-something% IFMJ guides. That's the American Mountain Guide Association. So it's not only that, you're looking at the makeup of the association as well.
All right, is there an international framework of some form of accreditation process for SPIs to be able to work in other countries?
I guess I can answer that. I mean, the SPI was built on the idea that it was met the standard, the international standard for the UIAA, so that was the way you could go across to New Zealand, Australia, the UK, some European countries with that sort of. And there is, I mean, that's about as far as we go. But yeah, I mean, that's what we went with the UIAA to try and get that international endorsement.
I serve as the American Commissioner on the training panel in the Mountaineering Commission for the UIAA, and I can say pretty matter of factly that the American standard, even though it is UIAA endorsed, is an American standard. It's designed to credential someone in the United States within our boundaries, and while it meets the same standard as someone might be meeting in Canada, let's say, there's no reciprocity arrangement between countries that I could go to Canada and say, well, I'm the same UIA kind of certification as you all are up here. It's just not designed for that kind of reciprocity the way an IFMGA guide is.
All right, does anyone want to open up this question from Andy?
I can give it a go. It says, when working with other organizations such as Boy Scouts, should we change our approach to theirs when on their property and in their program? It's really hard to give a particularly straightforward answer to this. I think that it's going to be very individual, and there's no do it their way, don't do it your way, but you're going to have to find some way to do things to the professional standard to which you've been trained, and make sure that everything you're doing is something that you feel comfortable and safe doing within your certification, but also understanding that there may be some things that you wouldn't do that way, but it's fine and they're safe. And so you sort of make compromises along the way. So I'm not sure, that's kind of an it depends answer, I guess, but I think you're just going to have to make some hard decisions about what battles are important to fight and matter, and what things are just not, you're just not going to win or are not worth fighting about. And those are hard questions to answer for yourself. And sometimes it's a combination of the two, of making a compromise and trying to help someone see why another decision might be better for their program. And maybe the change doesn't happen today, but it helps start a conversation for later down the road.
I guess I'm also curious, do you mean in terms of, are you referring to culturally, technically, in terms of technical climbing, skills and requirements? There's so many. I feel like I could do a whole day panel on working with the Boy Scouts. But they do recognize they recognize AMGA credentials and outside training in their internal climbing literature. It's pretty complicated. I'd be happy to talk with someone specifically about it. It's also quite easy as a certified SPI to become a merit badge counselor, and you don't have to have any affiliation with any specific troop. And then you are a BSA representative in addition to being the SPI. So you are the in-house expert for the troops in addition to not just an outside consultant. And there's no cost associated with that. It's super easy. It makes you really desirable to scouts, and it lets you kind of have a lot more control over how you run the day. That's been my kind of response is learn their rules and then run the programs the way I want to run them.
I've taken a similar approach with this because the BSA acknowledges the SPI as being qualified to be a merit badge counselor, et cetera. I've really just kind of gone through their literature and familiarized myself with it, and made sure that I wasn't doing anything really that far out of line within training as an SPI.
And Kevin just mentioned that there's a background check and a very lengthy online process. That is definitely true. It's a bit of a slog. They have obviously significantly increased their youth protection programming, and to the point where actually right now I think it's really good. but it's all free, but it will take you a couple hours to go through that process.
Yeah, I actually recommend the youth protection training really to anyone working in the outdoor industry. I think it's a great program that they've put together with and excuse me, put together, and we've actually incorporated a lot of their policy like straight into Blue Ridge Mountain Guide's operating procedures. So this next question is around some mentoring and maybe kind of upping the standard for somebody that just wants to work as an SPI and not pursue guide track programs or the multi-pitch instructor program. And there's a lot of resources out there. One, it's like great to be in this webinar asking that question. And then keep an eye out for mentoring opportunities with folks maybe within the company you're working with, or through the Facebook forums, the AMGA Professional Members Forum, and then the SPI page there on the East Coast. We see usually a few a year mentor days. I know Matt Shove in New England area usually does one. Last year, I think Karsten at Fox Mountain Guides did one. And then there's one up in the Gunks. So there's some out there.
Yes, me and Carsten did one.
What's that?
I said me and Carsten did one in Asheville last May.
Oh, awesome. So
Yeah.
Adam was a part of that too.
There's also a mentoring, an AMGA mentoring Facebook group as well, specifically for that. Specific posts there about those sorts of opportunities. It's also a great place to find just other SPIs who you want to like get out with and work with. You may be in the same boat. And then for that matter too, a lot of the mentoring opportunities in AMGA are driven by the membership. So if you want to have mentoring opportunities, one way to do that is to identify some folks who might be mentors in your area and just ask them. Like take the initiative and just generate yourself a mentoring day. I know that's a model that Ted Teagarden, who actually now works in the AMG office, used with pretty good success in the Northeast. Like, hey, I wanted a mentoring day. So just reached out to a bunch of folks in the area who he thought would be good folks and respected, and they were all willing to volunteer for a day. So they put together mentoring days and they run those regularly now. So if you're looking for those opportunities, self-generating them is a really definitely shows that you're invested in that, and folks are more likely to turn around and offer you some free assistance.
I'd also put in a plug for folks to attend the AMG annual meeting. I've been, with great pleasure running a clinic specifically for single pitch instructors, like taking their single pitch skills to the next level. We call it beyond the curriculum, but within the scope, and it's a lot of fun. So the AMG annual meeting, it's another place where the offerings will indulge those single pitch skills.
Plus, if you take a clinic with Ron, you get to learn about the Kraken, which is the best system for building top rope anchors.
Okay, last question here. Hitting 8:30, so if anybody does need to get out of here, by all means. But question is just, can we talk about the hiring process for new guides?
I'll take first stab. We're not the most traditional guide service, and that we're also a gym. So there's kind of two paths for most people who end up guiding for me. They're usually either someone who's coming from the gym side and who works for us and maybe teaches inside and then is going to go through the SPI program. And we'll get some mentorship along that way and some training. Or there's someone who's coming to us as a certified guide or instructor looking for work. Probably 50-50 on those, I think, for the most part. And then it's a combination of an interview. We do some skills trainings, and then, you know, I think really what I want to see before I hire someone is watching them teach. So we have some shadowing and some kind of supervised teaching opportunities for folks. Is something that I really like to do. And this is obviously going to vary hugely service to service. I'm sure you'll get 4 different answers here.
At Blue Ridge Mountain Guides, folks coming in as SPIs for almost all of our training, really a wilderness first responder credential is more relevant than a wilderness first aid. So we're looking for that. And the hiring process in a way is pretty similar to a traditional job. You know, we're looking for a legit resume. As Sean mentioned, some teaching experience is great. We do a lot of instructional work, a cover letter, and then we'll do phone interviews, and then possibly in-person stuff out at a crag. And then bringing people on really depends on where they're at. If they're newer, we're going to have them shadow and maybe co-teach instructional programs before they go and do any of those on their own. And then certainly going to start them off in terrain that they're really familiar with, that they've maybe done some in-house training with us on. And then we'll try to get them into other crags that we operate at.
So I formerly owned Bearhouse Mountain Guiding. We recently closed due to some permitting issues, but when we were hiring, we'd be looking for a woofer as well for our terrain. And then single pitch instructor was the minimum. We found that there's just there can be a large variability between those who completed a single pitch instructor course and the exam. And so for the type of work we need that requirement that you complete the exam. And then, we want a resume and some kind of cover letter or email that was like professionally written that, you know, indicates that you can communicate professionally to clients as well. That was, you know, often the case. Our guides would do that. And then depending on, we also probably want some more explicit climbing related resume as well, detailing your experience at various areas or things you've climbed, or just like giving us an idea of who you are as a climber. And then we also look for teaching experience. We did a lot of instruction. So that was really relevant too, was trying to suss out how much experience you had teaching in front of folks. And then otherwise, professional references are always helpful too. So that's a big part of it for our process. And then the interview, usually, you know, ask a number of questions ranging from like instructional technique to client care to risk management. And then would also go out in the field and go climb a little bit and just sort of see what your technical skills look like. And then from there, it was just a matter of training according to, you know, whatever level folks were at coming in, probably again echoing like co-teaching and that sort of thing until they're ready to go fly solo.
Adam, do you have any thoughts on this from Fox Mountain Guides?
What, hiring guides? I'll say the 2 of them in the panel. They should ask them. Not really. I mean, so as far as hiring, what I'm looking for, I mean, just certified instructors. That's what was a starting point. You know, was always that's the one difference we made back in 2001, 2002, 2003, I guess, was we just hired certified individuals, and that was a good, you know, that was the baseline for us. Nowadays, I don't know how it is nowadays with people for the hiring, but certified individuals with great backgrounds. And I don't know, how did I hire you, Ron?
How did you hire me? I was a certified top rope site manager. We met in that course, but then you were one of the instructors for a rock instructor course. And after that course, you invited us to do some multi-pitch work on a small scale and some teaching of a higher ratio booking. So that's how we got started. We were minimally qualified for multi-pitch. So we got a lot of mentorship that first summer, but we did teach a lot of top roping that first summer. That's how we started.
Yeah, yeah, back in the day. Yeah.
I guess I'd also add too that that prior experience can definitely buttress an application, right? So if you've worked the summer camp world, or you've got teaching experience in a climbing gym, or those sorts of things like that, that's all also relevant work experience that might buttress an application to work at a guide service. Or even the Boy Scouts, as we mentioned earlier.
I'll just add something real quick, having not hired guides, but having been hired a number of times, thankfully. One thing that's not been consistently applied, but it's always been helpful, and probably just depends on the size of the guide service, is as part of that onboarding process, getting some sort of employee handbook, or at least just some sort of outline of the company's policies, procedures, like expectations. A lot of guide services don't have that. I think we all know it's a pretty informal industry in a lot of ways, but that's always been helpful to me getting hired, just having something to reference instead of feeling like very in the dark when you first start with the guide service and you're like, what's okay and what's not okay.
Excellent. So I'm just shooting out on the chat here some links. Andrew's email address there. If you ever have any questions, you need to connect with him at the office, Dale, the technical director, and then also a link to the AMGA scope of practice that we were mentioning a few times. So with that, why don't we wrap things up? Again, thank you all to the panelists that participated this evening and last week. Really appreciate you all being here and again offering up your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome, everyone. I hope you all have a good evening, and hope to see folks out at the crag soon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.